Overcoming compassion fatigue in higher education. Our presenter today is Dr. Rachel Gallardo. Dr. Rachel Gallardo is the department head of psychology and anthropology at Blind College. She received her PhD in industrial and organizational psychology and spent 10 years in corporate human resources before teaching in a higher education setting. If you have any questions for the presenter during the session, please feel free to enter those into the Q&A section at the bottom of the Zoom room screen, and we will address them at the end of the talk. But on that note, I will go ahead and hand it over to our presenter.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you so much, everybody, for attending today. I really hope that the information that we talk about over the course of the next hour or so together will be helpful for you. And give me just 1 second here. Let me go ahead and share my screen. So, like Sarah said, we are going to be talking about how in the world can we overcome compassion fatigue. And even before the pandemic erupted, this was an area that I was very interested in because I saw different things happening around me. And so I wanted to explore why some of those situations were occurring. So just to kind of give you a lay of the land for what we're going to be looking at, first, we're going to talk about what compassion fatigue is. We'll go into a little bit of the research about why sometimes fatigue might exist. And then I'll give you a couple of tools that maybe you can take back to your own areas of the world for solutions for what might reduce the possibility of fatigue happening. And then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So like Sarah said, I did not begin in higher education. I actually began in corporate HR. And the primary industry that I was working in was healthcare. And so I started to notice that even though I had nurses that were very much committed to their jobs, they loved being a nurse, they really enjoyed helping patients and helping the family members during some really difficult times, there were aspects of how they performed that didn't really align with what they said that they were. So I would see nurses that would just kind of walk past a call light and not necessarily answer it. Maybe they delayed in getting something that a patient would ask for. And I really wanted to try to find out, well, I know that this person really enjoys their work, but at the same time, their actions don't align with what they say. So there was a little bit of that cognitive dissonance that was going on. And for me personally, I started to really feel the effects of fatigue from a human resources profession. I started to feel just very run down. I didn't feel very satisfied. And so the only part of my job that I really enjoyed was the training and development part. I found myself whenever we would do lunch and learns or we would have some sort of training webinar that I was really rejuvenated, but the employee relations, the benefits, the recruiting part was just really taxing. So I started to feel my own effects of the research that I was doing. Kind of like how your dog kind of models the human behavior, I started to model my own research behavior. And so for me, it was a natural transition into higher education. Well, to my surprise, I was like, oh man, this is going to be great. I'm going to go and I'm going to teach the minds of tomorrow. And I'm just going to always be fulfilled and I'm always going to be satisfied. But the longer I got into higher education and the more I got into teaching, it started to feel more like this. And I saw this not only with the colleagues that were around me, but I also began to experience this as well. And for me, it was really frustrating because I left corporate HR because I wanted to teach. And now here I am teaching and I'm feeling this exact same way that I felt whenever I was in healthcare. So I was like, there's got to be something else going on. There's got to be more to it than this. And this is when I stumbled across that phrase of compassion fatigue. So what in the world is compassion fatigue? One of the primary researchers in this area is a gentleman named Charles Figley. So feel free to go look him up. He's got a ton of information on this topic. But basically, when we're looking at our quality of life, and there is a professional quality of life scale out there, you've got two components. One component is compassion satisfaction, and the other component to it is compassion fatigue. So compassion satisfaction, this is when you feel effective with what it is that you're doing. You feel like you're making a difference. You feel that there's an appropriate amount of give and take from a work standpoint and a fulfillment standpoint, and everything is just kind of rolling along the way that it should. Now, on the flip side of that, though, compassion fatigue is the very opposite of that. So you still enjoy what it is that you're doing, but there's something about it that it's just a little bit taxing, a little bit draining. And the reason why compassion fatigue is such an important area for us to identify is because compassion fatigue is that stage just before a person enters into either full-on burnout or secondary trauma. Now, when we're talking about secondary trauma, these are individuals that maybe are firefighters. And so they're dealing with death and destruction on a regular basis, saving people from buildings only to have them pass away. It could be police officers that are dealing with a lot of death and violence on a regular basis. And so secondary trauma, I don't want to say it's more impactful, but it is kind of seeing humanity in a very bad light. Whereas burnout is just, I'm going through the motions. I don't feel anything anymore. I hate doing what it is that I'm doing, but I really and truly don't have the means to do anything else. And the reason why we want to try to capture people when they're in this compassion fatigue state, or really understand that this is where they're located at, because once an individual passes into full burnout or secondary trauma, the effects from a psychological standpoint are not reversible. You can treat it, you can cope with it, you can put different systems in place to help manage it, but it's not reversible. There's an element to that that will always be there. And again, going back to my own personal example of this, there is no way in the world I would ever go back to HR. I got to that point that I was just done. And when you're done and you know that you're done, you're done. But we don't ever want for our educators to get to this point. I mean, not only is it just not good for our overall physical and mental health, but it's not good for our industry. It's not fair to the students, and it's not fair to ourselves whenever we're operating in this state. So we need to try to identify if we are in a compassion fatigue state, so that way we don't get into this next layer of worse, okay? So just looking at the long-term effects, if a person is in a fatigue state, there is that element of mental exhaustion. And if this mental exhaustion persists, you can experience severe anxiety. There can be severe issues with depression. Depending upon how the person deals with different coping skills, then they may go into more extreme issues, of maybe drinking or binge eating or inappropriate spending, or, just a lot of negative self-harm that can be done if a person is experiencing this mental exhaustion. If a person is in a fatigue state, then there's definitely some disengagement that's going on. And we've all had instructors in our own academic journey where we could just tell that the instructor didn't care. Our students can tell if we don't care too. So we want to make sure that we're capturing, okay, am I really and truly engaged with my students? Am I responding to emails in a timely manner? Am I updating my slides, or am I presenting the exact same material that I've been doing for the last 5 years? And then also too, this fatigue state can make us feel like we have too many responsibilities. We're juggling too many chainsaws in the air, and we're not able to keep everything going. And all of those items lead to negative student outcomes, which is not anything that we want, right? So let's look at some potential reasons of why somebody might be in a fatigue state. And this is just kind of based on research that's out there. A lot of it is still very theory in nature. The world of psychology, we don't get a lot of laws because humans are very, there's a lot of layers to us, right? And so this is just one theory about where some of this fatigue might be coming from. So we have to look at our allostatic load. So overall, what is our stress level if we're looking at the world around us? So on a scale from low to high, and then on a performance level from low to high as well, the best place for us to be working is right here in the middle. So we have just enough stress, just enough pressure that keeps us interested, it keeps us engaged, it keeps us motivated, and it also helps us to perform at a high level too, because we were able to remain excited about what it is that we're doing. Anytime that you are maybe down here on the low end, so you have low stress, this is when you can start to feel very overloaded. Your performance is not accurate in the way that it should be, or it's not as good as it possibly could be. You typically have low morale from an overall organizational perspective. And then little by little, there is some fatigue that's going on, but if we can give just a little bit more pressure, then it actually does help increase our performance. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes the last minute is where I get some of my best work done because I've thought about it, I've thought about it, I've thought about it, and boom, now I'm going to execute. And so it's an appropriate amount of stress and my performance is high, which means I'm at an optimum performance level. But we have to be very careful because if we go too far over on the other side of the hill, we can start to experience some exhaustion. So maybe if I waited a little bit too long from the last minute, now I'm starting to experience exhaustion. And if I'm operating in this state for an even further period of time, this is whenever you can start to have a really true breakdown, right? So we never want to be in too low of stress because that means that we're just underwhelmed, but we never want to have too much stress either because then that means we are overwhelmed. And both of those areas affect overall performance. Another place to look at from a place of or a source of potential fatigue is self-efficacy. So self-efficacy is basically it's saying that you feel up to the challenge, that you are capable of doing whatever project it is, that you have the time to do it, that you believe in your own abilities to be able to perform at that level, and you've got the confidence and the resilience to be able to do so. People that are low in self-efficacy, they struggle with these ideas. They struggle with that time management piece, that self-regulation piece of getting things done. They maybe the first obstacle or the first barrier that comes up, they throw up their hands and just kind of walk away. Or it could just very well be that they don't have the self-esteem necessary to be able to do something new or to approach that project or to go talk to that dean about an idea that they have. If you have a low self-vision of yourself, that's going to weigh on you mentally as well. Those negative thoughts, those negative ideas are going to constantly play over and over again, which anytime you have that broken record going on is possibly going to create more fatigue in a person's life as well. Albert Bandura, who's a really great behavioral psychologist, probably most well known for the Bobo doll experiments. I'm sure some of you are familiar with those. It said that self-efficacy is the belief in one's abilities to organize and execute the sources of action required to manage prospective situations. And there's a lot of layers to that. If you believe that you're able to manage what is going on, then you're going to be more effective in doing it. If you don't believe that you're able to do that, then you're not. It's kind of like our good friends over at Nike. Just do it. People with low self-efficacy don't have the ability to embrace that concept. So what can we do? I've created just a short acronym that hopefully will help individuals as they're going through their day-to-day and to maybe try to see, okay, what is it that I can do to not have this negative broken record playing in my mind? And I want you to think of the word happy. And this is not a Pollyanna, let's just pretend like everything is okay, because if you're in a fatigue state, it's not. But hopefully this acronym of happy will give you some things to think about as you're approaching your day. Maybe take some time for a little bit of self-reflection or a little bit of journaling to see what are some areas that I can improve upon so that way I can work myself out of this fatigue state. Because remember, once we pass from fatigue into burnout, the effects of burnout are irreversible. If we can capture it whenever we're in a fatigue state, then we can reverse what's going on. So the H in happy stands for homeostasis. And some of this is pretty basic, but sometimes we have to start with the basics before we can advance to things a little bit bigger than that. And homeostasis is all about maintaining that physical balance. So making sure we have a good balance of taking care of ourselves. We're really monitoring what it is that we're putting in our bodies. Are we reaching for the Doritos? No shame. That's something I had to give up for Lent, was bad snacking. So instead of the Doritos, I got to reach for the apple, or maybe I go grab a banana, something that's going to give me the vitamins and the nutrients that I need to keep my physical body going. If I'm only loading myself up with caffeine and Doritos all day long, I can't really expect myself to perform at my most optimal, which is then going to add more stress. And here we go in this negative downward spiral. Sleep is a huge component to effective homeostasis as well. When we sleep, our brains have a chance to reset. Sleeping and getting the appropriate amount of sleep helps with memory overall. It also helps to make sure that our hormones are regulated to the level that they need to be. So what time are you going to bed? What time are you waking up? Are you giving yourself permission to take naps when you can? I mean, I know that kind of during the week, it may not work out for the best, but if you are able to work from home at one day, maybe for a lunch break, you take a nap where you can, or over the weekends, take a nap where you can. Sleep is such a beautiful thing. And it's one of the items that we don't capitalize on enough. If you're having trouble sleeping, then stop and ask yourself what it is that you're doing before you go to bed. If you're doing nothing but looking at your phone or looking at a screen, I know I'm guilty of kind of late night work, and I'm checking emails and grading and stuff, especially because midterms are right around the corner. All of that light is coming into your eyes. It's transferred back to your occipital lobe. And before you know it, your brain is not able to trigger the melatonin that it needs to help you get sleepy. So if you've got too much light that's coming into your eye, your brain thinks that it's actually still daylight and that it thinks that you still need to be awake. So it's not producing those hormones that you need to help you go to sleep. So just something to think about there. Water, huge, can't stress that enough. But then also too, what is your work-life balance? And I know that we've heard that before, and some of you might be thinking, Rachel, there's no way that I could possibly balance all of this out. It's something that we as educators, we've got to make sure that we set a time for. I like to be open and available to my students, but that's also not fair to my family for me to constantly be available to my students. They deserve my time just as much as my students deserve that time. So in your syllabus or, on first day of class, that first few weeks of class, if students are texting you or emailing you at all late hours of the night, because I'm sure your students, just like my students, like to email at 12:31 to 3 o'clock in the morning. Are you responding? Because if so, you're letting them know that you're going to be available at 2 o'clock in the morning. And so then they're more likely to do it again. From a reinforcement perspective, we as educators, we have to make sure that we're reinforcing the behavior that we want out of our students. And we're trying to stop the behavior that we don't want to see out of our students. So when you respond to those emails, when you make yourself available to your students, I know it can be really, really challenging, but it is important to have those solid boundaries in place. So that way you can take time for yourself, you can take time for your family, go hang out with friends, binge watch something on Hulu. All of that is completely okay. If you've put in the work that you needed to for the week, give yourself permission to not do more on the weekends, okay? So that's the H in our happy, homeostasis. The A in this, I kind of cheated. So I did a little bit of a double A here. So stay active, but then also stay away. And there's a couple of layers to this. So when I talk about active, physical exercise is key. Deep breathing exercises is key. Stretching exercises are important. I love the fact that our conference is virtual, but if we're sitting in front of a computer all day long, that's not good for our muscles. It's not good for our joints. It's not good for circulation. If you are on campus, where are you going to the restroom? Are you going to the ladies' room that's right around the corner? Or are you making it a point to maybe go to a restroom that's maybe on a different floor than yours? Or if you really want to put in a stretch goal, a different building, maybe on the other side of campus. Take that as you will. Down here, our weather is much nicer than what you guys might be experiencing if you're up north. But it is true that we want to make sure that we're using our bodies, that we're taking care of our physical selves. If our bodies aren't working, if our health is not accurate, if we're down sick, if we've got the flu, we're not going to be able to focus on anything else. Okay. And then again, with the away part, give yourself permission not to work. So this one kind of goes hand in hand with the homeostasis component of it. Schedule time to have those hobbies. Social media, take a social media break. Now be careful, because if you spend too much time on social media is actually designed to increase our dopamine inputs in our brain, and dopamine is our happy hormone. So if you get out there too long and you start liking this and people start liking that, and you're dependent upon that a little bit too much, you could get a little bit too of a dopamine drop, and that's going to put you out on social media a little bit longer, which then may interfere with your work, which then may actually cause more stress than it was supposed to. But if setting a timer for 3 or 4 minutes and scrolling through whatever social media feed it is that you have, just to kind of take that mental pause, can be helpful. Our brains actually function better whenever we give them mental pauses. So it's referred to as chunking. If you chunk your pieces of information together, so I'm going to grade for 30 minutes on this particular assignment, and then I'm going to go take a 5-minute walk, and then I'm going to come back and do 30 minutes on this other assignment, and then I might read a fiction book that has absolutely nothing to do with psychology for 30 minutes or so, and then I'll come back to it. When you do those little pieces of breaks, you're actually giving your brain permission to take a break as well. And that's going to actually help make you more productive than if you were just to power through and do 2 hours of grading. When you go to the gym, you don't just, run or get on, use some sort of weight training or whatever for a solid 2 hours. Or, if you do, more power to you, but I certainly don't. Having those mental breaks in between each set, or, I'm going to run for 20 minutes and then I'm going to take a 5-minute walk. Having you do that for your physical body, you should also be doing that for your brain. And if you really want to get schmancy about it, you can even put in a self-care plan. If you just Google self-care plan, there's a ton of documents that come up. If you're super creative and super right-brained, if you want to go all out with your self-care plan, then those resources are there thanks to Google. But even just something as simple as, today I'm gonna make sure that I'm taking those pauses every 10 minutes. Any little thing that you can do is gonna help, and it's gonna help ward off that fatigue that might be looming somewhere in the background. Now, there's another layer to this for the active and the away component. And this is where I wanted to get into it from an organizational support perspective. So we as educators, we do have a responsibility to take care of ourselves, but then also too, if you're in a leadership position, or if you're, any organization that might be out there listening to this, there's a couple of things that we can do from a business side that can also help our employees with fatigue. So one of those areas is sufficient onboarding or orientation to a position, or if a change is happening within the organization, giving the employees enough time to adapt to the change. There's a concept of unfreeze, change, and then refreeze. And I think that there's a lot of organizations that are really good with the unfreeze and change part. But then whenever it comes time to the freeze part, to the, okay, let's just see how this plays out part, there's a lot of organizations that are not very good at that. And when everything broke in 2020 for COVID, I understand that there's a number of organizations that didn't have that luxury. We were one of those that definitely had to move everything online. There was a lot of unfreezing and change happening over a long period of time. But there needs to come to a point where every organization says, okay, we're going to pause for a minute. We're going to let people operate in this way for just a little bit, so that way they can catch their breath and feel comfortable in what it is that we're doing. Because if an organization is constantly changing, the employees are going to get to a point where they don't see the point in doing what you're asking them to do, because you're just going to change it again next week. And that can be really frustrating. That can be really discouraging. And that can cause people to just kind of want to wipe their hands and say, what's the point? I know you're going to change this in a month or so. Why do I need to invest my time and energy now when I know it's just going to change? So from an education, from an administrative perspective, we've got to be smarter. And I say we because I'm department chair, and this is something that I really try to keep in mind with my faculty too. Anytime we're implementing a change, we need to give time for people to adapt to the change, and to really see if that change is working before we just implement another change as well. Orientation and onboarding for new faculty is super important too. I won't say the institution that this happened to, but when I was adjuncting, because I worked as adjunct driving all over the place for about 4 years, there was one situation where I was literally given a book and a syllabus on Friday afternoon, and class started Monday at 9:10. So it was a very stressful weekend. Somehow I got it together. Somehow the semester was a success. But it's very stressful for you to just dump information into people's laps and not really give them the tools and the resources to help them acclimate to the college culture. Having those, even if it's just every other week with those new faculty that are coming in that are just starting with the organization, those biweekly meetings can be really critical. Because if you sit and you have an onboarding discussion with somebody, the week before classes start, and then you never talk to them again, people don't know what they don't know. And so having regular onboarding discussions with the faculty member, with the new employee can be really helpful, because as questions come up or as situations happen in the classroom, it's fresh on the person's mind. You can address it right then and there and then keep moving forward. Having some sort of mentor that this person can go to. So maybe it's not the department chair or the assistant dean that the person is connected with, but having a mentor within the department that they know that they can go to and talk to if certain issues come up in the classroom can be really, really helpful. That cognitive support from an onboarding perspective is really huge. The second item to this is having access to medical care. Many organizations have really great benefits plans. Many organizations don't have very good benefits plans. And any way that we can improve the medical care that is available to not only the full-time employees, but to the part-time employees too, is helpful. Any sort of employee assistance program can be beneficial, and not just having the program there, but actively promoting it, because there's a lot of people that don't necessarily know what is involved in an EAP. They don't know what their benefits cover. They don't know that if they have a gym membership that the organization will pay for a portion of it. And these should be things that are constantly given out, or just sent out in an email, or some sort of announcement or posting somewhere, just so that way people are more aware. Because when somebody is drowning, they may not be quick to think, well, let me call HR and see what sort of benefit options I have. If that information is more readily available, they may be more likely to use that as a lifeline instead of a last resort. And then the third item on here that I think is just really important, and this from an IO psychology perspective is something I'm super passionate about, is leadership development competencies, and really taking a look at the skills and the abilities, the KSAs that each leader has. And by leader, I believe everybody has the ability to be a leader. I don't think you need to have a job title to be a leader. But understanding what this person's strengths, and I don't like to use the word weaknesses, I like to use the word areas of opportunity that we can all improve in, will really go a long way. If you look at really great organizations, not only within the higher education sphere, but just across the nation as a whole, really great organizations have really strong leaders. And the more that we can develop these leadership competencies, the more skills and tools and just information that we can give to people to help them build their leadership skills, this is going to trickle down to every other person within the organization. It's not just about your title, it's what it is that you're doing for the people that report to you, the people that are in your division, within your department, et cetera, et cetera. So we've got homeostasis. The A was active and away, and now our P stands for progress, not perfection. Whenever we talk about perfection, there is a lot of research out there that shows that people that suffer with issues of perfectionism have an increased chance of depression. They have an increased chance of suicidal thoughts, or even following through with those suicidal thoughts. And they also have an increased chance of bipolar disorder. Perfectionism is a characteristic that is also a trait for early death for people that are diabetic because of chronic stress. So here's a little teeny tiny bit of a biology lesson. Whenever somebody is in a state of chronic stress, our body releases steroids to give us that boost to our fight or flight. The problem with that, though, is that the steroids in our body will attack the white blood cells in our bodies. White blood cells are used for immune support. So basically, if you are operating in a state of chronic stress, you are literally physically attacking your body. The steroids in your body to help you deal with that stress are attacking your white blood cells. And so you may be more prone to getting sick, having issues with your immune system, maybe you just feel run down all the time. It's because your body is literally attacking yourself. And for those individuals that are diabetic, this increases the issues of death if you're constantly dealing with issues of perfectionism. When we look at data for young people, and by young people, this is anybody between the ages of 15 to 25, 70% of young people who have died by suicide, they have exceedingly high expectations of themselves. And social media doesn't help, and that's a totally different presentation. But when you're comparing yourself to other people, you're wondering why you're not good enough. How come I'm not faster, smarter, skinnier, taller, shorter, whatever? You're still comparing yourself to other people, which is an ideation of perfectionism. And that is a huge reason for a lot of the suicide deaths that are here in our country. And if you look at the data, if you look at the research from 1989 to 2016, the perfectionism trait is up by 30%. Now, that 30% number are people self-reporting that they have issues with perfectionism. But still, for us to be dealing with 30% of the population has now added perfectionism as a mental issue that they're dealing with on a regular basis. That's a huge number when you look at how many actual people that is. What I can say to all of this is you don't want to focus on where you have been, like you want to focus on the progress that you have made. Don't look at everything else that you still have to do. Don't worry about your to-do list for next week. You know, we're going to take things one day at a time. We're going to do the very best that we can with what we've been given for today. And then once the end of our day is here, we need to just let it be and then move along. John Lennon, great, or the Beatles, I should say, great song, just let it be. And sometimes that will play in my head too. So maybe that's another tool I can add on here. But seriously, do the best you can with what you have with the time that you've been given. We don't all have the same tools. Obviously, we don't all work at the same institutions. And some institutions are really good about providing the support that we need, the leadership that we need, the understanding, the medical benefits, whatever it is that we need. But do the best you can with what you have, and then let the rest of it go. Anytime you're comparing yourself to somebody else, you're increasing the possibility of that fatigue. You're increasing that negative cognitive playlist that's going on, and you're getting in your own way of being an effective educator. Like I said, it's not just how far you have left to go. You are not where you want to be, but you're not where you used to be either. If I could go back and talk to the Rachel that started that class at 9:10 in the morning on that Monday when I'd only had the book for 48 hours, I would tell her, you know what, it's all going to work out. I'm X number of years removed from that class. Now I would like to seriously apologize to students that I had early in my teaching career, because I have learned a lot. In those first couple of years, man, if I could go back and just reteach those students, I certainly would. But I'm also not going to spend time beating myself up about it. I did the best I could with what I had. I gave them the best resources that I could. I taught the best way that I could. And there were successful outcomes. But, you know, we can all remember our early years of education and where we are now. Celebrate where you're at now, and celebrate where it is that you know you want to go. You're not quite where you want to be maybe, but at least you're making progress, and that's what's most important. And then finally, our why in our acronym of HAPPY is to be you. There are a lot of educators, I think, that are so concerned with trying to teach like somebody else teaches. Oh, well, this instructor uses this particular technology, so I have to use that technology too, or I'm not a good instructor. That's just a complete and total lie. That's simply not true. Your journey is your own. And I would encourage you, if you can, you know, ask other instructors, what are they doing? Go sit in a discipline that's not necessarily yours. I had the opportunity to attend a teaching conference before everything broke with COVID, and I sat in a humanities demonstration that just blew my mind. The content that they were given, her research that she had done, and it was all over Freddie Mercury from Queen. Amazing content, and I was able to apply 3 or 4 different things to my psychology courses to make them better. So don't try to compete with somebody else, whatever somebody else is doing in your department, whatever resources they're using. Oh, well, you know, if you know, Dr. So-and-so is able to turn around his grading in 2 days, well, good for you. It takes me 7 to 10 days, and I have it noted in my syllabus. It'll take 7 to 10 days. Don't compare yourself with other people. We really truly don't know where people are at in the different chapters of their life. He might be at the beginning of the end of a chapter, and I could be in the very middle of a chapter. You don't really know. And so you never want to compare yourself to other people, because that is certainly going to steal your joy. It's going to continue to play that negative mental recording, and that's not good for anybody. And on a final note, I just want to say, we as educators, we really and truly have the ability to help the next generation of students that come through our class. I really believe that our students are looking to us for guidance, for motivation, for encouragement, for new ideas. They're also looking to us, and to a certain extent, for those boundaries and those study skills and things of that nature. But if we don't take care of ourselves, we're not going to be able to help our students. If we are not excited about learning, how can we expect our students to be excited about learning? If we're not responding to emails, we can't really get upset if they don't bother to show up for student hours, right? So there needs to be a balance on both sides, and being able to really and truly be there and fulfill what it is we need to fulfill for our students. We've got to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves. And I have just a little bit of a shameless plug. So all of that stuff that I talked about from a leadership development standpoint, I believe in this so much that I took a risk. And as our friend Brene Brown would say, I took a major risk, and I created a podcast that talks about leadership development. It's 15 to 20 minutes of just little nuggets of information. It's not industry specific. It's not all psychology. It's not higher education, anything. But if you want just a little bit of just encouragement and just different things to think about, I do take elements of psychology and kind of combine them into a leadership development podcast. So if you want to check that out, feel free to do so. It's out on Spotify. And as any good educator, I've got references. So I know that this information will be available to you. Feel free to go out and check out any of these resources. They can be 100% helpful. Again, Charles Figley is kind of the pioneer of this idea of compassion fatigue. So feel free to check out his research. I don't get paid. I don't even know him, but I've read a lot of his stuff, and it's really good content. And at that, I'll take any questions that anybody may have. And I do love this topic. So please don't be a stranger. If you ever want to just send me an email, we can set up a time to talk on the phone or Zoom or whatever, and we can go through anything at all. So, Sarah?
Thank you, Dr. Gallardo. I apologize, my internet cut out for just a second, but I appreciate all of the information that you shared with us today. Looking at the Q&A, it looks like we just have one comment in there right now. If anyone does have any questions and wants to throw those in there, now's the perfect time so we can address any of those. Okay, looks like no questions at the moment. Thank you again so much. And we will have our next concurrent session beginning at 1 p.m. Eastern time. So you can view the chat for session meeting room links or access to the conference website for a complete list of concurrent sessions and their descriptions. While accessing the conference website, don't forget to swing by the exhibit hall to say hello to the Hawks team, view a quick 5-minute demonstration, and you'll be entered to win one of our hourly giveaways for your choice of a 6-month subscription to Audible, 1-year subscription to Disney Plus, or $100 Amazon gift card. But thank you all so much, and we'll see you at our next session.